Hi, everyone. Welcome to Seahawks postgame show. Thanks for joining. I'm just kidding. It's GRG Talks, another episode. I'm joined by the DK Metcalf and Geno Smith of the investment property world. Say hello to Quint Newell and Max Steinermeyer. Say hello to the people, guys.
Thanks for having us, guys.
Thank you, Philip. Very kind of you.
Now we are...
I'm DK, right?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. Why not? You're DK. So we are... It's either a celebration of sorts, right? Because the Seahawks either won or they got stomped by the 49ers. Which way do you guys feel? That you'll either look like geniuses when this comes out or it'll be a bad prediction. What do we think?
I think from Quint and I's side, we're really hoping they cover.
You have separate interests in the event.
Exactly. Money line would be great, though, as a Seahawks fan, that's for sure.
Awesome betting line. We are actually not going to talk Seahawks, although I'm pretty sure that Max...
Niners by 20, just for the record.
Niners by 20.
No.
Holy cow.
It is difficult to beat a team 3 times in 1 year, though.
That's true.
So
That's true.
As the Packers found out with the Lions. Sorry.
It's all right. I don't want to talk about that one anymore. That'll be on my other Sad Sack Packers podcast.
The sad cast.
Yeah, sad cast, because we have one guy for lots of time and lots of money. We're actually talking today not about the Seahawks, though. We're talking about investment property, and specifically a lot of the in-office investment property we see here locally, and kind of where the market is and where you guys envision the market kind of maybe going. So if you're ready, we'll dive right in.
Okay, great. Well, yeah, we wanted to pick the topic of kind of office space, and I think one of the themes that was brought up or was kind of a topic of discussion that we could dive into would be some of the office space in town that we see vacated by some of the large state agencies or local governments that can be somewhat difficult to backfill, from the private sector. We don't quite have the private sector businesses in the Thurston County area that have the same kind of employee rosters that a state agency might have. One of the examples that I think is a great one that we weren't involved with the redevelopment of, but did bring some tenants to once it was completed, was the hub in Lacey.
Oh, yeah.
So the hub in Lacey is, was a kind of a area of large office buildings. I think it was about 400,000 square feet in total office
massive
space that was vacated by various state agencies and, kind of sat for, quite a while with, this, what iteration does it take here moving forward? Do you razz it to the ground and rebuild smaller structures or whatnot? But what ended up happening was a group, I believe they're out of Kent or up north, called MJR, and they've since, through this experience, I think not only doubled down, but triple and quadrupled down, because now they're working on other projects over here on the west side that we can discuss as well. But essentially, what made this project, I don't want to say go, but what made it feasible was that that these were not distressed, but large, empty office spaces. Right. That was it was going to take a visionary to really take these things on and make the investment needed to revitalize them and kind of have them have a second life. Working with the city of Lacey, they just invested money hand over fist, and now it did get to 100% occupancy. I don't know if that's the case now, but they were able to basically fill up over 400,000 square feet of office space through various smaller local businesses like mortgage lenders or insurance agents, and then larger occupants like some medical engineering firms and things like that took more larger floor plates and things like that. But it's a great success story. The buildings look terrific. There's a few restaurants that have gone in there. And in fact, they've continued to acquire property in and around the hub, not just for office space, but they just finished I think it's a 100+ unit apartment complex as well, just on the outside of it. It's kind of a tap room below. So it really just doesn't stop at the office revitalization, but kind of really enhancing the area in and around these projects, creating housing. And now on the west side, they're doing that with some of these old, courthouse buildings and other buildings around the courthouse. Be interesting to see what happens with the courthouse. I know that there's debate on doing a new spot downtown, and that's kind of still in limbo. But that would obviously be another, large area of building complex that would need to figure out some kind of second use if they did decide to move the courthouse. 101 that you can see from 101, it just, they look like different buildings, cleared out some trees, and really did a great job of enhancing these things and attracting, new businesses to move down. We had a forum the EDC put on at the Red Lion about a month back, talking about projection, population growth, business moving down, and really one of the things that stood out to me was just the the square foot rate and the real cost effectiveness of being down in Thurston County versus a Pierce or a King.
You're right.
And really just they've got I-5, kind of some of the construction is seemed to finally be completed.
Yeah.
They've got the carpool lane now going through JBLM and all the way. So, I think, I don't want to say traffic's going to, get easier on I-5, but I think it's being less of a barrier to people looking further south into Thurston County and even Lewis and beyond. So I think we're going to see a tremendous amount of growth continue down here, and it's just been great to have the success up to this point with the repurposing of these buildings.
These last 2 years have been pretty much like nothing I've ever seen. I never thought personally, especially being here in sort of the like center of the wheel with regards to government, and the fact that they needed these massive buildings to house all of their different employees. I never thought I'd see a day when the actual conversation would be, well, maybe we don't need these buildings. And it brings up what you're talking about, brings up so many different questions, starting with how has the sort of work from home model, we've noticed it, how it's affected state offices, but in your line of work, how has that work from home model changed the office investment market?
It's still shaking out. I think it's interesting. Like you said, there's been this tectonic shift over the last, kind of few years. Initially, it was introduced as a, the way of the future. Maybe nobody's going to come back, and what does that look like? Most of the repurposed office space we just discussed had kind of been filled up prior to the pandemic. There wasn't a lot of contraction, but what I think of is, kind of the Amazons and the Microsofts of the world. These folks that have hundreds of thousands of square feet of office space in places like South Lake Union, and what that's going to look like moving forward. I don't have, a finger on the pulse of really what those markets are going to look like. I can speak to the market here where, I didn't personally see a whole lot of tenants requesting to break leases or saying, hey, we're not getting any, but nobody's coming back to the office. We don't need this office space anymore. But what I have seen as, we've kind of come out of the pandemic and some of this stuff has started to shake out is, the work from home thing. I think while it may be, kind of available and something that some people go, do or try to take advantage of moving forward, I don't think it's going to be this, complete change of the landscape. And now you're going to have 50, 60, 70% of the workforce moving forward just working remotely. I think that what I am seeing as we come out of this is maybe a little bit of a consolidation. So maybe someone had, 4,000, 5,000 square feet corporate office needing, 15 to 20 employees. Well, now you've got 10 to 12 that are there pretty much every day of the week, maybe another 4 or 5 that are there just a couple of days a week, and maybe a handful that just don't come in anymore.
Right.
So they just don't have the need for, all of the office space, but they still need place for people to come, and so maybe they're downsizing by a couple thousand square feet or into 1,000 square feet. So I don't see them, moving away from having a location.
Like they'll have to have something that they have to get back to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And who knows? Maybe in another year, it really shifts back to what normal, whatever that means.
Right.
That we'll see a move back into other office space. But one of the I think the best developments over the last few years, 3 to 5 years, is the success that we've had in Thurston County with repurposing these spaces and not having them become derelict properties.
Yeah, that's neat.
And
Quint, you mentioned repurposing, and one statistic that I wanted to bring up was, I forget where I read it, but the vacancy rate on office space right now, from what I'm hearing, is about 17.5%, which is, I think, the highest it's ever been.
Oh, wow.
So do you think that in the future here, property owners, commercial owners are going to have to start working with the city on possibly repurposing some of this office space, or maybe going more towards the retail route? Or I know we've had a little bit of issues maybe generating some interest on some of our smaller office spaces, and we've kind of gone from talking smaller office spaces to, these bigger Microsoft and everything. But for these smaller spaces,
I think it'll be interesting to see what happens with all of it. I mean, maybe a different podcast conversation too, but this idea that, with behavioral shifts or technological shifts, we're still watching the kind of slow death of retail after the introduction of e-commerce. We have this phone in our hand and we have all of these technological advances, and we're all excited about where it's taking us, but but there is some pain points for some of the existing ways of life, if you will. So I think maybe not repurposing into retail, but I do think that the mixed use, some of the stuff that we're seeing downtown with the development of the mixed use properties and some of these zoning locations along Pacific or Lacey Boulevard, where you might have a single story structure that's in need of some investment, or need of some kind of rehabilitation. And there comes the argument or the point, well, is it the highest and best use as it sits right now? And is it better to tear this thing down and maybe go vertical, get some living, some apartment units, some housing above with then retail below? You diversify your income stream, and I think create, obviously more housing where there's a great need, and you've obviously got a different type product there. So I do see some of that
maybe
transpiring.
multifamily.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was the question I had. How easy? None of it's easy, but how? What does the transition look like to potentially turn some of these bigger buildings that could be eventually all the way completely abandoned by some state agencies or local agencies, turning those into multifamily investment properties?
Yeah, most of what we've seen has been ground up. The lack of housing, the need for more affordable housing, makes those opportunities and those possibilities much more likely. I think the first, not step, but, is it the right zoning that would allow it to either go vertical? What are the height limits? There's some rezoning talk over here on the west side by the mall about allowing for 14-story buildings, which would certainly change the landscape. I don't know if that's preemptive on my point about retail and malls and what's that going to look like in 10 or 15 years. I'm impressed with how quickly they repurposed the Toys R Us over here into a Planet Fitness and a Harbor Freight. Just for comparison, the Pier 1, which is also a great location, has not, I think they've got a tenant in there now and maybe a dentist moving in there, but that one has been slower to kind of repurpose. But these larger box stores that are kind of standalone, not to mention the mall, what does that look like?
Right.
And if you do change the zoning or allow for, high rises or more vertically integrated construction, does that spur investors to come in and look at new opportunities and things that weren't even, on the map or even in consideration, 3 to 5 years ago.
Right. So as we sort of I think close out here, one of the things I wanted to ask you guys, I like to end a lot of the podcasts this way, and that's to talk about sort of the future and what your guys' feelings on it is. We're obviously in a market that has a lot of unknown variables at the moment, but it doesn't feel like one that is just super dire. What do you guys see in the future? Are you optimistic about the way that Lacey Olympia Tumwater can change its face with some of these investment properties, or do you think it's going to be a challenge that the community is really going to have to look into?
Well, the crystal ball question.
Yep.
I'm still very bullish on Thurston County just in general, and it's more of a macro lens, I guess, that I look at that through. I just feel some of the points we made about I-5 corridor, amount of land, cost of living. I just think there's a lot of ingredients that make Thurston County really attractive. Now, going back to the conference that I was mentioning that the EDC put on, some of the population growths that they had for Thurston County over the next 10 to 15 years were pretty modest. And so I don't know if that's spot on or conservative, because I look at Thurston County as, having over 500,000 people in the next 10 or 15 years. And I think this was still under 400,000. And so I think, that'll be a big question. What kind of population growth will Thurston County really experience over the next 10 to 15 years, and how will we be able to adapt, or at least kind of work public-private with the municipalities on some of these land use issues, some of the the changes in zoning that we discussed with allowing people to go higher in certain areas as far as building vertically. So I think that those all work in our favor. The cost of living is the wrong word, but just the cost of land, cost of labor, cost of not materials, but just the ability to do these projects and redevelopment in a more cost-effective way, or in an area that allows for maybe a more cost-effective entry point.
Yeah.
But housing is going to be a big bottleneck on getting to that 500,000 population, you think?
Yeah, and then it comes down to a land use thing, and I don't want to see urban sprawl or
right.
Yelm and Tenino and Rainier eventually connected. I just think that there are ways that we can work smarter and not harder to prepare for what I do think eventually will be a population boom for Thurston County.
Yeah. Yeah, this is an incredibly interesting subject, because what we thought would be sort of the status quo forever literally changed in like a year and a half or 2 years. So it's going to be interesting to keep an eye on all of this to see how we sort of change the face of the county, really, because it is now just a completely different game that we're playing,
Yeah, we're here for it. And I think, one last point I'll make too is, I think no one really under the age of 50, has too much experience or any experience in an environment with interest rates and inflation the way that they are. I mean, we have experienced, I would say 40 years, but certainly 15 years of unbelievably historic low interest rates, and not just low, but dropping precipitously over time.
Yeah.
So if you think about where interest rates, were in the 80s versus now. We're talking about 2,000 basis points.
Wow.
Right? I don't think people. It's
Wow.
almost hard to from where we were, the low. Now coming back up, to where we are now, I just don't think that we'll experience that again.
Yeah.
So rates, yes, will they come down eventually? I think that we'll settle in somewhere. But I do think we're entering a new era for the market and just for the economy in general.
Yeah.
Because the days of free money stimulating or low interest rates really being the driver are gone, and I don't want to say gone for good, but I just don't think we're going to have another other side of the hill
Yeah.
with interest rates the way we did over the last 40 years.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Yeah. Wow. That is a fascinating thing. Well, DK, Gino, thank you very much for joining us. Good luck to the Hawks this weekend. Hopefully, next time we talk, it will be after a win. Thanks a lot, everybody, for tuning in to GRG Talks. We'll talk to you later.
Thank you.
Thank you.